force field, of course, it's alien technology. Nothing that humans can do matches this. If I take my hand, because I'm a human, and try to penetrate the force field, you see I can't do it. I could push maybe about 2 centimeters in, and that's it. It doesn't hurt. It feels a little tingly. It doesn't hurt, but clearly the field is not going to let me through no matter how much force I apply to it. UFO researchers have suspected for some time that the alien base at Area 51 has been shut down. All of the operations there involving extraterrestrial craft have been moved elsewhere, and the big question is, where have they been moved? And now for the first time I can reveal that they have not been moved to one location, but to 17 different locations around the world, mostly in very remote places. The cover story for these installations is that they are schools, known as the United World Colleges. Colleges in this case refers to what Americans know as high schools. So these are schools for high school students situated around the world, but in some very strange and remote locations. On the surface, there is a school. There are students, there are teachers going about doing all sorts of schooly things. But what's important about these facilities is what is underground, because these schools provide a cover story for a vast underground base that is much larger than the school itself. For example, here at Waterford, there are 67 levels below ground that house the alien hardware and the aliens, and it dwarfs the size of the school on the surface. The whole facility is about 1 kilometer in diameter, most of it underground. And there are students here, there are students and staff here who have no idea they're sitting on top of one of the most sophisticated technology centers in the entire continent of Africa. This is ironic because here in Swaziland you can barely get good internet. And yet below ground there is technology that blows the internet away. Get down, get down, get down. I saw a security patrol. I don't think he saw me. I think we're clear. So right now we're behind this Waterford facility, which is a really high security facility where anything you want could be going on. We just don't know. It's essential that we get to the viewpoint by dawn on a Sunday morning, because that's when the supply ships come. And we have to come up from the back side of this viewpoint because we don't want security to detect us. If they know we're here, they're going to shut down operations and we won't see anything. Okay, we have reached my secret viewpoint into the Waterford UFO facility. I think we've evaded security coming up here. We're in a kind of a protected little notch here where they can't see us. There was a helicopter passing by a few minutes ago. I don't think he saw us, so I think we're safe for now. And as I mentioned, this is Sunday morning, and there's a reason they choose Sunday morning for these cargo operations. Sunday morning there are no classes on campus. There's nothing scheduled on campus. Most of the people on campus are sleeping in. However, there are going to be a few people awake, and that's why I have this. I'm wearing my radiation helmet, because they know that people are going to be awake, so they bathe this whole area with omega radiation. And this hat that I made myself blocks the omega radiation. Omega radiation, basically it puts everybody to sleep. Everybody who's not asleep already is going to be put to sleep by this omega radiation to keep these operations secret, because there's going to be a huge UFO passing over here. And they obviously don't want anybody to see it. They want to keep the staff and the students in the dark about the real operations here. So I have the hat. I have the hat, and because I have the hat, and we and the crew have the hats, we're going to be able to see what goes on down there. It was the biggest UFO I've ever seen, an alien craft longer than 2 soccer fields hovering over the Waterford facility. And I have the video to prove it.
But if a government really has made contact with aliens, as science fiction insists, where could the evidence be hidden? One suggestion is here, Area 51, a secret military base in the heart of the Nevada desert. The guards patrol the perimeter constantly in unmarked jeeps, and the penalty for crossing the boundary is death.
Area 51 is only the best-known secret base in a vast military complex where anything could be true.
Glenn Campbell quit his job as a computer programmer and moved to Nevada to try to find the truth behind the base, where it's rumored the military keeps several captured alien spacecraft.
We don't even know who runs this base. We don't know who their bosses are. We don't know if they report to the Air Force or to the President or whoever. We don't know that there's any accountability at all out here. There are a lot of little valleys and desert nooks where you could hide secret facilities, where you could hide anything you want, where you honestly could keep alien craft secret.
With Glenn Campbell. Glenn and I first met up 16 years ago when I came out to this same desert trying to get answers.
Bei unseren Recherchen stoßen wir auf diesen Mann, den exzentrischen Programmierer und Buchautor Glenn Campbell. 20 Jahre lang hat er in Rachel nahe der Area 51 gelebt und versucht, hinter all ihre Geheimnisse zu kommen.
I took it upon myself to tell the world, hey, there's a secret base out here. And I was wildly successful. You have no authority to take that camera. It was just like old times. I was out doing some research along the border of Area 51. There are 2 kinds of aliens that occupy this base. One of them is your typical gray. You know, the guy with the bulbous head and the big eyes and the tiny body. And then there's a second type of alien called the hybrids. And this is the result of a breeding program between aliens and humans. And the result is something that looks like a human but thinks like an alien. And another word for these hybrids is administrators. So most of the administrators at these UWC schools, they in fact are aliens. They are not humans. Their primary responsibility is to protect the facility from anything that the aliens below ground perceive as a threat. This conspiracy is like the layers of an onion. You peel back one layer and you get another layer. You peel back that layer and there's another layer and another layer under that and another layer after that. And pretty soon you're starting to cry because there's so damn many layers. I've come to Swaziland to investigate the Waterford Facility, which looks like a school on the surface, but goes down 67 levels. This facility is a little unusual for a school. It's surrounded by a barbed wire fence with guard houses, and you wonder, why does a school need a barbed wire fence? In 2015, I investigated a UWC facility in a remote part of Great Britain. This one was housed in a castle protected by high stone walls that can only be breached with a trebuchet and a lengthy siege. You wonder why such sophisticated security for such a simple facility. And the fence line is just the beginning of the security system at the Waterford facility. Just inside the fence line is a force field, an electrogravitic force field. It's invisible to the naked eye. It's selective in how it works. Animals can pass through the force field without even detecting it. Certain humans can pass through the force field if their DNA is registered with a database. But if you or I were to attempt to cross this force field, we would be stopped. It pushes us back. It's like walking into a wall. Every one of these 17 facilities is covered by this protective dome that I call the UWC bubble. Normally you can't see it with the naked eye, but under certain atmospheric conditions, it becomes obvious. For example, I pulled these photos off the social media streams of the UWC school in Norway. Some naive photographer thought he or she was taking a photo of a rainbow, but it's obviously too perfect to be one. This, in fact, is the force shield interacting with the droplets of rain. Now, if that's not a smoking gun, I don't know what is. And what you see is a dome that covers the entire facility. It's a dome that protects the facility from terrestrial and extraterrestrial threats. It appears as a dome on the surface, but it's really a sphere that goes all the way around the underground facility. So you can judge the relative size of the underground facility from the curvature of the sphere on the surface. And I've tried to do the calculations as best I can, and that's where I come up with the rough calculation that this base is 1 kilometer in diameter. So the nature of this force field, people can walk through it. People who are students, who are staff, whose DNA has been registered with the database, they walk right through it without even knowing that it's there. But me, as an unregistered person, someone who's not authorized into the base, I'm walking straight into something that I can't pass through. The UWC bubble is not just a physical barrier, but an information filter. It's a semi-permeable membrane that allows only certain kinds of data to flow in and out. For example, the only information allowed to escape from the bubble is happy news that reflects positively on the school and its mission. All sad news, bad news, and mad news is reflected inward, where it bounces around forever and is never dealt with. If you monitor the social media streams of any of these schools, you'll see what I mean. It's a constant stream of good news. Every student at every school is having a fantastic time. According to the output streams, everyone is having fun. Every event is a smashing success. There are never any conflicts on campus. No one is ever sad. Everyone is grateful to be there, and every school is a big, happy family. This is called propaganda, and I know that's a big word, but just think of your Instagram account, and you put all the best moments of your life, all your most exciting accomplishments you put into your Instagram account, and all the bad stuff and the ugly stuff you don't put into your Instagram account. So people look at your Instagram account and you think that you have a fantastic life because you're not really telling them everything. And that's what propaganda is. And everyone does it all over the world because you have to do that to compete. If you're competing for funding, or you're competing for students, or you want to sell hamburgers, you're going to tell the people only the best things about your product. You're not going to tell them the bad things about your product. And the aliens have to do that too, because they've got this huge facility that they want to protect, and they need to maintain this cover story about this school. So the school has to be stable, and the school has to attract students, and it has to attract funding. They're just more efficient than we are because they have alien technology, and they've got this semi-permeable membrane that allows the good news to come out and reflects the bad news back in. So what is this bad news that's being reflected back inside the dome? The fact is we don't know. because it's top secret and it obviously can't penetrate the membrane. The best we can do is speculate on the kinds of problems there might be within an alien-sponsored institution like this. There are two classes of bad news that might be trapped within this dome. Human bad news, the sort of thing that might happen at any educational institution. And then there is alien bad news, which is unique to these alien-sponsored facilities. The human news is amplified by the unique structure of these institutions. The way these institutions operate is obviously designed by aliens because it is unlike the structure of any other schools on Earth. Each of these schools is a sort of Noah's Ark, taking 2 of every animal, or a limited number of students from each country. The schools themselves don't have much control over who attends. Instead, countries send delegates, much like delegates to the United Nations. And like the United Nations, sometimes the high ideals get bogged down in bureaucracy and politics. Now, as to what the reason is that one student gets in and another student doesn't get in, no one knows that. It's a mystery. It's obviously dictated by the aliens. But once these students come together, they've been chosen by whatever criteria, they come together at these schools, then you're dealing solely with a human problem. And the human problems are kind of predictable. What's unusual about this school is that this is not just rich kids, students whose parents can afford the tuition. They're all also very poor kids. They're kids from hard circumstances, from war zones and refugee camps. And you're bringing all this diversity together in one place. And, well, you're going to expect some problems. You're going to expect some social conflicts, but you're also going to expect some problems when people are taken out of their original environment, no matter how bad or good it may be, and plunked down literally in the middle of nowhere, on an island in the middle of nowhere. And you're going to expect some adjustment problems. Imagine a student who grew up in a war zone, who's been struggled to survive all their life, and you suddenly transport them to Norway, which is just about the most ideal society on Earth, and you put them in this little utopia called Red Cross Nordic, which is probably the most perfect school that could be. And you can't just expect them to discard all of their past and suddenly fit in. And this is the sort of thing that never gets out of the membrane. It never gets into the propaganda stream, and everybody is made to believe that everyone is getting along great and everyone is grateful to be there, and this school is the best thing for everyone, so give us money. There are bad things going on in the school, and they're all kept within the dome. And I contend that even within the dome, bad news is suppressed. For example, I've heard rumors of missing persons who vanish from these schools without a trace. Maybe you're a student and you wake up one morning and another student is gone. Or there's a teacher who's there one day and not there the next, and no one knows why. If you try to ask what happened, you run into a brick wall because everything at these schools is shrouded in confidentiality. That's a sort of government secrecy where only those with a need to know are allowed access to the information. Virtually everything on campus involving a conflict between humans is hidden behind confidentiality. This means, for good reason, that a student with mental health issues won't be publicly embarrassed for seeking help. But it also means that any wrongdoing by faculty or staff remains hidden from view. But on to the alien problems. Well, as I mentioned before, the highest level of these organizations is run by hybrids. People who look like humans but are actually half alien in their DNA. And they are the product of a alien breeding program. And I really don't want to get into the details of this alien breeding program because it's kind of ugly, and it involves alien abduction and embryonic transfer, and that's just something for a whole other video. In any case, the people at the top of the structure, that would be the headmaster and his assistant and maybe a few others, the communication director, certainly the director of development, and the headmaster of the school are aliens, I guarantee you that. And their primary mission is not the school. Their primary mission is protecting this vast underground alien base, 67 levels below ground. And they're doing the bidding of the aliens. And what the aliens want above all else is stability. They don't want anyone rocking the boat above ground. They don't want anyone drawing attention to their facilities. And that is the primary mission of this hybrid class. It's not that they're good or bad. It's just they're serving a different master and they're thinking like aliens think, which is not necessarily superior. It's just different. They have different compartments in their brain. And the conflicts arise, the bad news arise when these administrators try to manage humans, like human teenagers. And the question is, how can you manage human teenagers? Even if you're a human yourself, but especially if you're an alien, how can you manage human teenagers if you don't understand them? So those are the two areas of bad news. We have human bad news, the conflicts within the campus, and then you have the management bad news, where management might not be adequate to the task of managing this human population. The presence of alien bases on Earth raises obvious questions. Who are these aliens? Where do they come from? What do they want? And what is their plan for us? Unfortunately, the answer to most of these questions is, we just don't know. It's a fool's errand to try to understand the motivation of these aliens. They're simply so far advanced beyond us in technology that we don't even have the framework for understanding them. These are creatures that have somehow managed to cross vast interstellar spaces. No matter what star system they come from, we can't even conceive of the technology that brought them here. The only way the aliens are interacting with our society is through these 17 secret facilities. So at least we can look at these facilities and see how they operate. It's sort of a portal between aliens and humans. I suspect that they are a network of some kind, and I've looked at the map in every conceivable way, trying to figure out why one school would be located in northern Norway and another one is in the remote part of Africa, and others are in Canada and the United States, and the locations don't make sense. They seem like they're just randomly located, but I'm almost certain that the aliens have some reason for locating these bases where they do. Why do they put schools on top of these bases when they could do something like put an oil refinery on top? Oil refinery would be a lot easier to maintain than a school. And I'm speculating that maybe the schools themselves are part of the alien plan. The aliens obviously choose the students. They decide which students are going to go here, and they are communicating instructions through the hybrid class to these schools. I think that there's some sort of long-term plan, like maybe the aliens are planning to eventually reveal themselves, and when they do, these specially trained individuals that went to these schools might serve as ambassadors between aliens and humans. That's just my speculation, but I think that the schools themselves are part of the plan. Now, the alien-human hybrids above ground are easier to understand. Since they're a cross between aliens and humans, we can at least look at the human part and see how alien DNA may have modified it. Now, I have never interacted with the gray aliens, the ones underground, but I have had contact with the hybrids above ground at 2 of these facilities. So it's not like I'm just making this stuff up. I have some data to work with, and I'm going to go through this data in detail a little later. I acknowledge that my sample size is small and the data is preliminary, but it's enough for me to come up with some credible theories that should be taken seriously. Now, hybrids look like humans. They speak English, which is the primary language used at these 17 facilities. But in terms of their mind and how their mind is structured and how their brain works, they couldn't be more different from us. They have what I would call a hive mind. So what do I mean by this? Well, instead of thinking as individuals, as you and I think, they solve problems as a group. Imagine if you're taking a test. Well, you look at the problem in front of you, and you look at the facts of the problem, and you look at the logic of the problem, and maybe you do a little bit of research, and then you come up with your own answer that you write down on the page. So it came out of your brain. And the hybrids have no grasp of this concept of having one's own brain. Instead, well, they go into the test, and they look at the problem, and they have no idea how to approach that problem. Instead, what they do is they look at someone else's test, some other hybrid, and they copy the answer of that other hybrid. Now, in the human world, this is called cheating. But in the alien world, that's just the way things work.
You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile.
So this is what I mean by the hive mind. No hybrid is capable of making his own independent judgment about things. They just follow other hybrids. Now, I understand that this hive mind works pretty well for the pure-blooded aliens, the ones underground, because they are all psychically connected to one another. And they join together into one brain, which is much more powerful than their individual brains. The difference with the hybrids is they are not psychically connected to one another. That facility was lost in the breeding process. Instead, they're just very impressionable. And they look for social clues as to what other hybrids are thinking and doing, and they just try to duplicate that behavior. Unfortunately, this doesn't really give you a stronger communal mind. What happens instead is just the stupidest member of the group determines the behavior of the entire group. It's like if one of them jumps off a cliff, they're all going to jump off the cliff because no one has the judgment to say, whoa, is this really a good idea? Now, as I said, I've had my own experience with the hybrids, so it's not like I'm just making this stuff up, but I could see how you might think I'm making this stuff up. So the burden is on me to show that I have the data to support these fantastic allegations I'm making. So I'm going to tell you my story. It might take a little while here, but when it's done, I think you'll see, I think you'll agree that there's something alien going on at these facilities. There's something here that doesn't quite fit with conventional human values. Before I tell you my story, I want to clarify a couple of things. The alien conspiracy at United World College is a theory. I believe I have compelling circumstantial evidence, but as of today, I do not have proof. And I do not have proof because I have been denied access to these facilities, or at least two of them, the one in Norway and the one in Swaziland. So I cannot physically check to find the entrances to the underground base. So until that happens, I have to admit this is a theory, not a fact. Now those supply ships that you saw hovering over the Swaziland facility, those are actually artists' conceptions, because when we went on a Sunday morning, unfortunately we must have been detected, so they scuttled the mission and we didn't see anything. So I talked to the art department and they made up these UFOs based on eyewitness accounts. And that gray alien that you saw, that also is an artist's conception based on the testimony of various abductees. And that dome over the schools, over all those 17 schools, the electrogravitic dome that also serves as a semi-permeable membrane for information, that one is 100% real. No special effects involved. And I think many alumni of these schools are going to agree with me that the school is in fact covered by a dome, and the effects of this dome are that students may not be as well prepared for the real world as they could be. This is a story in 3 chapters, covering 3 steps in my UWC investigation over the past 3 years. First, we have the 2014 incident, in which I flew to Norway to give a lecture at a UWC school, only to have the lecture canceled at the last minute. Then we have an incident 2 years later where a crime was committed by a member of the staff of the same school, the same staff member involved in the previous incident. In the 3rd chapter, I traveled to Swaziland, Africa, to investigate another UWC school. If you have any interest in this school system, I think you'll be fascinated by these stories, maybe even horrified, even if you don't believe in aliens. It started in November of 2013. That's when I was traveling around Europe, and I spent 2 nights at a hostel in Copenhagen. And I don't know if you're familiar with hostels, but if you're visiting Copenhagen and you're a mere mortal like myself, you can't afford to stay in Copenhagen at the Danish prices. You would stay at a hostel, and a hostel is shared accommodations where you sleep in a bunk room instead of a room to yourself. And I checked into a 6-bed bunk room in this hostel. And it turns out that the 5 other beds were occupied by students from this interesting school in Norway. I thought at first that they were college-level students, university-level students, but it turns out they are high school-level students, what we in America would call juniors and seniors in high school. And I met these students. I learned about their school. It was very interesting to me. We friended each other on Facebook, and I went back to America. When I got back to America, I did some research on this school and found it was very interesting. It was kind of a United Nations of schools, a nonprofit entity, part of a system of schools called the United World College that brings together students from all over the world in one typically isolated place. So it's like a Noah's Ark of schools that brings 2 of every student from various different countries to this campus in a very remote part of Norway. So I was intrigued by the whole concept of it, and it occurred to me that, hey, I'd be interested in visiting this school. And I read on Wikipedia that every week the school has a lecture program on Fridays and brings in people from off campus to lecture on all sorts of various political issues. And I thought to myself, hey, I could do that. And my field is Area 51. That's what I'm famous for. I've been on television all over the world as an expert on Area 51, the secret military base in Nevada, where there could be UFOs or conspiracies or anything you want. And millions of people have seen my face, and so I kind of thought I would talk about this. They might be interested in me talking about Area 51. So in December of 2013, about a month after I met these students, I contacted one of them and said, I'd be interested in speaking at your school. What do I need to do? And we talked about it, and I came up with a written proposal, a 3-page proposal, offering my services as a speaker to the school, that I could come and talk about Area 51. Things just didn't go very well from that point on, because the school never really formally responded to this request, to this offer. They didn't thank me for it. They didn't, write me back about it. They only asked about whether it was any funding was involved, and that email got passed to me, and I said no funding was involved. So they acknowledged receiving this proposal, but they didn't respond to it positively or negatively for almost 4 months. So we were very frustrated. I and my student sponsor were really very frustrated by this. We wanted we expected them to respond, and no one responded. So I went ahead and made my plans. I made flights to Norway anyway, and I figured, well, if they wanted me to speak, I'd speak. If they didn't want me to speak, I wouldn't speak. My main destination was supposed to be Moscow. Russia remains the only country in Europe that I have not visited. Applying for a visa to Russia is extremely complicated. You have to have a local sponsor, you have to have a full financial disclosure, and you have to have bought your plane tickets before you even begin the application process. So in December of 2013, when I submitted my speaking proposal to the school, there was plenty of time. I had 4 months, plenty of time to do all of these things. However, as the weeks went on and the school didn't respond to my proposal, I started to get backed up against the wall. So by February, I had to do something. If I'm going to apply for this visa, I had to get my tickets. So I went ahead and bought my tickets with a stopover in Bergen, which is the nearest big city to this school. And I figured either I'd speak at the school or I'd just do some sightseeing. In any case, I would rent a car for about 3 days. I could drive the 3 hours up to the school, or I could drive off in a different direction and do some different sightseeing. It was kind of frustrating at this point. In February, 2 months after I submitted my proposal, they're still not getting back to me, but they did have some instructions for me. And these instructions were passed back through my student sponsor, the guy who submitted the proposal for me, and the instructions were I had to show up on Thursday. So this lecture series is normally given on Friday evening, so my plan was to arrive Friday afternoon, I'd see the campus, I'd give my talk, and then I'd leave. But they wanted me to come on Thursday to meet the staff. That was the instructions passed to me. So I changed my plans. Before I bought my ticket, I arranged to come to Norway 1 day earlier to accommodate their request. So the fact that they're sending me instructions implies that they're aware of my proposal and seem to be accepting that I'm coming to speak, but no one has actually invited me to speak. They seem content in just telling the student that I've been invited and passing all the messages, all the information I would need through the student, which wasn't supposed to be his role. The idea of my contacting a student is that I didn't know this school, I didn't know who's in charge of the speaking program, so the idea is he would provide an introduction to me. He would submit my proposal, which he did, and he submitted to all the right people, to the headmaster of the school, the deputy headmaster of the school, the head of the speaking program, and they kind of acknowledged receiving it. But from that point on, they chose to deal only with the student. I thought that they would have contacted me. I thought someone on the staff would have called me or something. And this was extremely awkward because it put this student in the position of trying to negotiate for me and trying to serve as my spokesman, and he just wasn't equipped for that, and he shouldn't have been forced to do it. I think it's just laziness. I think no one at this school, no one in this administration wanted to take any responsibility, so they just dumped their responsibility on a student. Then 2 weeks before I actually arrived, it turns out they wanted me to speak. No one from the school actually contacted me, but they passed back through this student that, yes, they wanted me to speak, and they were very excited about my speaking. And I could speak about Area 51, and they also wanted me to speak about a book I had just written about marriage. So everyone is very excited 2 weeks in before my arrival. At the same time, something else is happening. I'm a Facebook friend of I have about 6 active Facebook friends, the people I met in Copenhagen, and 2 or 3 inactive friends from the school who just friended me and I never communicated with. 2 of these friends, my Facebook friends, I provided a service to them. They were both graduating seniors from this high school, and they're going on to schools in America. And their problem was that they had never been to America, and they could not visit these schools that they had just been accepted to. So I offered, and they asked me to visit these college campuses. So I visited 3 college campuses on behalf of these 2 students at their request and with their permission. And I took candid photos of the campus. I wandered all around campus. In one case, I took a campus tour, snapped a lot of pictures, put them in Facebook albums, and sent them these Facebook albums. This all happened in late March. Now, right around April 1st, about a week before my flight to Norway, things blew up in a big way. And in a way, I really didn't know what was happening, but there was some sort of big tension at the school. My only contact with the school was with my student sponsor, and he told me that he was being called into these meetings, but that he wasn't allowed to tell me what was going on in these meetings. So there was some sort of big tension going on at the school. And I figured it's because of something I posted on the internet, which is, I have tons of stuff on the internet, tons of controversial, hundreds if not thousands of controversial essays and videos on the internet. I figured somebody found something they didn't like and was upset about it. So I had no idea what was going on, but there was some sort of tension. So 3 days before my scheduled lecture, as I'm getting on my plane to Norway, I get an email from an administrator, my very first email from an administrator, and he's making allegations that I have had improper contact with a student. It turns out one of those students who I went to visited campuses for, I visited one campus on her behalf. She told the rector that she was uncomfortable about my coming to campus. And I responded as best I could, but this is the little spark that set off a series of events that led to the cancellation of my lecture. And this is where the paranoia comes in. We have fears building upon fears without any underlying evidence, because my only contact had absolutely no contact with this one uncomfortable student except a discussion of college choices and my visiting this college campus. On April 8th, when I'm at the Boston airport getting ready to board my first flight to Norway, I received an email from someone at the school who did not identify themselves. This email contained an accusation in these 2 paragraphs. In the interest of openness, I'm afraid I must comment that one of our students who you met this winter in Copenhagen expressed some concern to the rector that you would be visiting RCN this weekend. In confidence, she felt uncomfortable with some of your interactions with her on social media. I discussed this with the 4 members of our education management team this afternoon, including the senior house mentor responsible for student welfare, and they asked me to pass on this concern directly to you. Please understand that we take our duty of care for our students very seriously, and ask that you observe the sensitivities surrounding adults interacting with students in a residential context for students of this age group. I see a little inconsistency here between these 2 paragraphs. I don't really object to the first paragraph. It's saying that a student is uncomfortable, and a student has a right to be uncomfortable about anything they want to feel uncomfortable about. The only thing I would object to in this paragraph is that he's given me confidential information on his very first communication with me. I'm a stranger at this point. So to start out a sentence in confidence is kind of absurd. Normally, I would think you don't give out this kind of information to someone you haven't communicated with before. But factually, I don't object to the first paragraph. It's saying that a student is uncomfortable. What I object to is the second paragraph, which is clearly implying that I have done something wrong. We've jumped from a student being uncomfortable to sensitivities being violated. So this is telling me that the person who wrote this email is not unbiased, that they have already made up their mind about what is going on here and that it's something improper. And this is reinforced when we go down the email to the end where a request is made of me. I appreciate this is late in the day, but the rector usually requires me to request a reference/recommendation for a guest speaker coming for the first time to our college. First of all, it's bullshit, because I seriously doubt that the rector has ever requested a reference/recommendation from any first-time speaker at the college. I think that's absurd. He's also making a request that I can't possibly fulfill. I'm getting on a plane, and I have no idea what a reference or recommendation is. I haven't dealt with references and recommendations since I myself was in high school, so I don't see any way that I can fulfill this request. So I'm at the airport in Boston, USA, beginning my long series of flights that will eventually take me to Bergen, Norway, where I expect to rent a car and drive 3 hours to a campus where I may or may not give a lecture. And I know that something is up. I know there are tensions at the school, that something is upsetting people at the school, but I have no idea what it is, because my only contact at the school, a student, is forbidden to tell me what the tension is all about. And I'm at the airport when I receive this email, and this is my very first official direct communication from the school I'm supposed to be speaking at. And this email is essentially a sexual harassment allegation, saying that I made a student uncomfortable. Now, the term sexual harassment is never used, but clearly that's the implication. So, how should I respond to this? It's a real challenge here, because I only have an hour before my first flight takes off, before I board my first flight. And then when I get to New York, I have another hour before I board my second overnight flight to London. So I've got 2 hours to work with. I have this explosive email in front of me. The person who sent me the email seems to be talking with the authority of the school, but he hasn't identified himself. He's only way he's identified himself is with his first name at the bottom of the email. So from his first name, am I supposed to know who he is? I don't know if he's the head of the school. I don't know if he's somewhere in the middle. I don't know if he's the janitor. I have no idea who he is. And I'm being told that I made a student uncomfortable. And I don't know who that is either, because I can't think of anyone who I might have offended. It's a female because he uses that pronoun, her, and I have 4 female friends on my Facebook list from this school. I have no idea which of the 4 it is, so how can I possibly defend myself from these allegations? And furthermore, these are kind of vague allegations. You know, it kind of sounds like I said something improper to this one student, and it's a he said, she said situation, isn't it? So how do I defend myself in this very volatile situation? And I managed to. It came up with a brilliant defense. But I had 2 hours to work with, so first of all, I want to deal with the simplest problem first. And while I'm still in Boston, I respond to the reference and recommendation. So as I'm getting on my plane, this official wants a reference or recommendation. I haven't a clue what that is or who I should get it from. Am I supposed to find some? I don't have any professors. I don't have any employers. Who do I get this reference or recommendation from, and what is it? So that was fairly easy to respond to, and I said basically that in my email. I don't know what a reference recommendation is. I'm getting on the plane. I have no opportunity. You haven't told me what it is. I just can't respond to this. So I sent that email, and I put off the other issue, the issue of the uncomfortable student, I put off to the next email. And I said, I'm getting on a plane to New York. I will respond when I get to New York. And on the plane to New York, I composed my brilliant defense to this ambiguous situation. So how do you defend yourself from such a vague complaint? Well, I used the Facebook defense. And I think any lawyer would agree that this is absolutely brilliant. So I have 6 to 8 Facebook friends, six active Facebook friends of people I've actually met, and a few others of people I didn't actually meet. And one of those is uncomfortable with me. But I've had no contact with anyone outside of Facebook. Facebook was almost 100% of my contact with these students. The other 1%, maybe 1%, we friended each other on Instagram or something, but nothing happened on Instagram. So all of my communication with these students is on Facebook. One of them is uncomfortable. So what's my defense? I wrote back to this unidentified official. Well, if one of these students is uncomfortable with me, why are they still my Facebook friends? Because no one who I friended from the school had unfriended me. So whatever discomfort I caused this student, it was not sufficient for her to unfriend me on Facebook, which in a case of sexual harassment is the first thing you would think someone would do. It's their responsibility. Yet you have some official at the school rushing to come to the defense of this student, apparently not even asking that, not even knowing anything about Facebook, just the fact that I made them uncomfortable. And it seems that they haven't asked the obvious question. Well, if he's making you uncomfortable, why are you communicating with him? Why are you still connected with him on Facebook? And I put that into words, and I put that into very calm, diplomatic language, and I sent that off just before I got on my flight to London. I sent that off to the deputy rector. Well, I sent that off to this official who I later learned was the deputy rector.
And there's a whole range of things that could be interpreted as harassment if you're going to use a broad definition. The student handbook is urging students to talk to a staff member if they feel any kind of threat. Well, does that mean that any student can just walk into the rector's office and express their discomfort directly to the top guy? This is kind of strange to me. I mean, aren't there counselors? Aren't there house mentors? Aren't there any intermediate people that the student should have been talking to instead of going directly to the top guy? It's like the school has made harassment, the harassment mechanism, just so accessible that anyone can file a harassment claim about anything and get the administration to pay attention. And this is extraordinarily dangerous. It's turning the harassment enforcement system into its own form of tyranny.
So I get to London and I check my email, and things just keep getting worse. There seems to be nothing I can say to defuse this unidentified official. He doesn't acknowledge my Facebook defense at all. He just changes the subject. And he didn't acknowledge most of my arguments about the reference and recommendation, like my question, what is a reference or recommendation? He just changed the subject. He just said, well, I understand that my request is late, and he changes the subject. And we go back and forth, and I can't possibly chronicle it all here in a video. You can look at the actual emails themselves on my website. I have a whole big section dedicated to this in my website. You can Google for witch hunt in Norway, and you will find my big section that has all the emails, all my exchanges with this official. So I've got a 24-hour layover in London. I'm visiting a friend in London. Then my plan is to take the short flight to Bergen, check into a hostel in Bergen, spend the night there. Then the next day I will rent my car and drive up to the school to be there for my Thursday meeting as I was instructed to do. Now back in London, I have a series of exchanges with this unnamed school official. I try my best to calm him down. From the moment he sent that first email back in Boston, I realized I got to be really, really careful here. I realized this guy's an idiot. I knew from the first email this guy is an idiot, but I don't want to say that, or I definitely wouldn't be speaking. I'm writing everything I'm writing. I'm carefully considering it strategically. I'm considering that other people are going to read this email. Maybe this email will be public someday, so I'm very careful about what I say and do, and that continues in London, and I get him calmed down. You see, I don't owe anything to the school. You know, I've given up on the school. At this point, basically back in February, I just gave up on the school, and I couldn't care less whether I spoke there. What concerns me is my student sponsor. I am loyal to him. I don't want to hurt him. He has gone through hell on my behalf for these whole 4 months, but especially over the last week, where he's been called into these tense series of meetings that he can't talk to me about. So essentially, he has been required to act as my lawyer, to defend me against vague sexual charges. But he's not allowed to talk to his client. So I think he did a fantastic job under the circumstances in defending me and defending my honor. But I'm just mad as hell that he had to go through this. So even as I'm corresponding with this school official, I'm also sending my emails to my student sponsor, and we're discussing them in background. We're discussing in the background how I should approach this, how I should react to these various things. And he doesn't want me to make waves. This is his school. He does not want big disruption. He wants things to be calm. So I'm trying to keep things calm. So, and to be fair, the school official tried to be conciliatory. He tried to offer me things. For example, here I have crossed an ocean at my own expense. I'm renting a car at my own expense. This, in one of his emails, the official offered to help me find a place to stay in the area of the school. Now, he's not offering to pay for the place that I would stay. He's just offering to help me find a place to stay, which, if I didn't have the pressure of my student sponsor, I would react quite violently to, because essentially this is a slap across the face that I'm giving up all my time and my resources to do what I thought was a service for the school, and he's quite pointedly offering me this thing that has no value. You know, he should have just shut up. Instead of offering to find me a place to stay, he should have just shut up. But he's an idiot. He also offered me a free meal. So he said that I can eat in the canteen of the school before my lecture. So I'm going to get a free dinner out of this. At least I think it's free. He didn't say whether I had to pay for it or not. And he said I would be escorted by a student advisor, a faculty advisor. So I'm going to be, the moment I come onto this campus, I'm going to be escorted everywhere I go. I've already been informed through my student sponsor about a week ago that I was not going to be allowed on the residential side of campus. I was only going to be allowed on the academic side. And up to that point, I had no idea there was one side or the other. But obviously, when I come in here, every moment is going to be monitored and controlled until I leave campus. I'm going to be allowed 1 hour for my lecture. And they dictated the subject of my lecture. I offered to speak about Area 51, but they dictated through my student sponsor that I'm going to speak about the case against marriage, my book, which is great. I can speak about that. But I resent being told what I should speak about without anyone in the school directly communicating with me. So I'm keeping this all in check. I'm keeping calm because I'm loyal to my student sponsor until I get to the point where I just can't back out. The official told me that I was to report in the afternoon on Friday afternoon and no earlier because they didn't want me to disrupt classes on campus. So they now want me to come on Friday. After telling me that I had to come on Thursday to meet the staff, and I changed my plans for that, now they want me to meet on Friday. And that's where I had to draw the line. I said no. I said in an email, no. I was told to report on Thursday to meet the staff. I want to report on Thursday to meet the staff. I want someone to take responsibility here. And it didn't have to be on campus. I'm willing to meet any member of the staff off campus in the nearby town if that's what they wanted. But I wanted to meet one member of the staff. So that email went out just as I am boarding my next flight to Bergen. I'm going to be going directly to my hostel and checking in there. And so I sent this email. Now I realized that, I'm going to blow things up now because I'm insisting on coming on Thursday. I sent this email as I'm getting on my flight to Bergen. And sure enough, the next day, things totally blew up. And the head man was brought in. This is called the rector, another word for headmaster. This is the head of the school. And he came in almost immediately with an ultimatum. Didn't ask me any questions, didn't do any of the preliminaries of thanking me for speaking or anything like that. He came in with an ultimatum. They wanted me to talk to them on a conference call while I was still in Bergen. So I'm already in Norway, 3 hours south of where the school is, and they don't want me to come to campus until I have a conference call with them. All I have is my American cell phone, and at the time, my American cell phone cost me $2 a minute. But by the time I received the ultimatum email, the time that he had specified, he gave me 2 possible times for this conference call, and I'd already missed the first one, and I decided to miss the next one. Before the next one, I emailed them back, no. I'm going to come to campus. I want to meet some member of the staff. I'm already here in Norway. It's senseless for me to spend $60 on a phone call. It's going to get us nowhere. I want to meet a member of the staff. So there's our ultimatum. The head guy comes in with this ultimatum. He's in full support of this idiot administrator I've been dealing with before. Asks no questions. Everybody, he already seems to know everything. He's conferred with all his associates. He knows everything. He just issues this ultimatum. That just hardens my ultimatum. I say, meeting in person or no lecture. And he's saying, conference call or no lecture. So, guess what? There was no lecture. And by the time I rented my car the next day, I got an email saying my lecture had been canceled. It was disinviting me from the lecture that I was never really invited to. And this again, it came from an unsigned person, a person I had never had any contact with, signing themselves by their name, not giving their role, who they are. It turns out that was a student. So you have the head of the organization issuing an ultimatum. And yet when it comes time to actually deliver, he had a job to do if he's issuing an ultimatum, and it's his responsibility to follow through with that ultimatum. But he somehow dumped it down on a student. So it's a student who's telling me that my lecture has been canceled. So that's the dividing line. When I received that email, I had no reason to be nice anymore. And that's when I started working on a massive document to document all of these things. I started working on a website that would document all of these things. And I told my student sponsor about it. I told the other people and my Facebook friends about it, that I've got to report this. The world has to know about this. And they were really upset. They didn't disagree with me. They didn't disagree. They didn't say that that I didn't have a case. They agreed that I had been wronged, but they did not want me to release this document. They did not want me to reveal what has happened to the world. So a few days went by. So I had a few days. I did my tour of Norway. I avoided the campus completely. I did my little 3-day tour of Norway. As I'm doing my tour, I'm working on this document, which is knitting all the emails together in chronological order. And I'm telling my friends about it. They say, don't do it. And I waited till I actually left actually left Norway. Turns out my Moscow thing never happened. I was never able to pull off the visa. Instead, I went to Switzerland. Once I left Norway, I didn't want to be subject to all of Norway's confidentiality laws. I don't understand Norwegian law as it regards to confidentiality or saying bad things about a school. So I did not start publishing that until I got to Switzerland. This was Monday. So Thursday, my thing was canceled. By Monday, I was in Switzerland, and that's when I started publishing my account of this debacle. And that's when all of my friends at Red Cross unfriended me. All on the same night. Monday night, I call it the Monday Night Massacre. So what's important to note is that up until that point, no one was upset with me. No one had unfriended me. When I was 2 weeks earlier, when everyone was enthusiastic about it, everyone of my Facebook friends wrote to me and said they were looking forward to my lecture. But now that I'm saying something bad about their school, they all unfriended me. Which is kind of, it happens all the time. I lose Facebook friends all the time. It's not a huge thing. I'm most disappointed about losing my student sponsor, but you do what you have to do. Basically, the school put them in this position, whether explicitly or implicitly. The school put them in this position that it's either him or us. Either you support us, the school, or you support him, this outsider. And they made the logical choice. I don't blame them for this choice. Their loyalty lies with their school. They have no responsibility to me whatsoever. But that also left me free to be completely open about this document. It turned into a huge document. I found out who all these people were. I did my research and found out that this unnamed official was the deputy rector, the assistant headmaster of the school. I did all my research about his background and the background of the rector or the headmaster. And I looked up the guy, the head of the speaking program, who never contacted me in any form at any time. I looked up him. He's an elderly history teacher who apparently is just waiting to retire. So that's the end of that episode. It's a 2014 episode. I spent the next couple of months assembling this huge document online. I call it Witch Hunt in Norway. Back then, witch hunts had a certain cachet. Now that Trump is always suffering from witch hunts, I wish I had named it something else.
Well, I respect the move, but the entire thing has been a witch hunt.
I'm in Vardø, Norway, which is just about as far north as you can get without being a polar bear. This community is known for its isolation and also for its witch trials in the 1600s. You've probably heard of the Salem witch trials, where 20 accused witches were executed. In this place, there were 3 waves of witch trials in the 1600s, and over 70 people were executed. It turns out Norway did not always have an exemplary human rights record. Now, I take a special interest in witch hunts, having been the subject of a few of them. So who's the first people burned at the stake? Well, it's your eccentrics, your intellectuals, the people you don't quite understand. In other words, I'd be dead long ago in the 1600s. So in my document, I identify 3 incompetent parties. One of them is the head of this speaking program who never communicated with me. The other is the leader of this organization, the headmaster, who seems to have no leadership ability. He just wants other people to tell him what to do. But most of my ire is focused on this deputy rector, this unnamed official who communicated with me. And I put most of my attention into him because he's not just the assistant to the headmaster. He's essentially the law enforcement officer for this small community. He's the sheriff. And if he can't handle my case, you can be pretty sure that he can't handle any other cases as well. If you're a student and you're called before him on some disciplinary matter, basically your goose is cooked. You're screwed because you can't offer any defense. He won't hear your defense, just like he didn't hear my Facebook defense. Now, teenagers break the rules. That is what teenagers do. Part of being a teenager is testing the rules. And I believe that if a teenager breaks the rules and gets caught, then he must be brought to justice. Otherwise, the teenagers will run the show. They'll run the asylum. But the whole question is, what justice should he be brought to? And the key thing is that it has to be a just justice. It has to be fair and balanced, just like a justice system in the real world. If you violate a rule and you are caught and you are brought before a quasi-judicial process where you have a chance to defend yourself and explain yourself, and the evidence is presented in such a way that it's not biased, and you have an unbiased lawgiver who looks at all the evidence and makes a judgment, finds you guilty, and gives you a punishment that is appropriate to the crime, not too harsh, not too lenient, that is not abuse. That is responsible justice. And the person who receives that punishment is probably going to recover pretty quickly. They will change their behavior. They will stop doing what was wrong. They will quickly forget about it. That's the way justice is supposed to work. But if you're accused of something you didn't do, or if you're accused of motivations you didn't have, and you're brought before an unfair judicial process that has already decided on your guilt before you even open your mouth, and that unfair process gives you a punishment that is totally totally incompatible with the crime, that over punishes you for a minor crime, that is abuse. And that is something you will not forget. That is something that's going to stick with you for your entire life. So that's the thing that keeps me going on this. I have become victimized by someone, and that someone is still in power at this school, and he's still causing damage at this school. Even though I can't see it, I know from my experience it is going to happen. And he doesn't, here he is, the sheriff, he's the judge, jury, and sheriff of this town, and he hasn't the slightest clue about any of the intellectual skills that are involved in that, like being innocent until proven guilty, and looking at evidence instead of feelings. He's not an evidence-based guy. He's just a feelings-based guy. And my student sponsor nailed him perfectly. My student sponsor said, he's a grown man acting like a child. And that's what you've got here. He spent his entire career within the UWC system. He's known no other part of the world. He doesn't know the world beyond campus. He has no concept of the sort of complex reasoning that students are supposed to be taught. He's never taken that course on logical thinking. So he's going to screw up, and he's going to hurt people. He's going to abuse students just like he abused me. At the time, I had no evidence. I had no evidence of other abuse, but I knew it was going to happen. And in fact, it did 2 years later. And I have the evidence. And that's what brings us to Chapter 2. In April of 2016, that's 2 years after my incident, there was another incident at Red Cross Nordic involving the deputy rector. And I'm going to be a little cagey about this. I'm not going to give you any of the details in this video. I've already made another video specifically about that incident, which I released a year ago. I'm Glenn Campbell, a lifelong government accountability activist, talking about a different kind of government and a different kind of accountability than what I'm normally associated with. People see me as the Area 51 guy, the guy who fought for U.S. government accountability at the secret base in Nevada. And this video is nothing about that. This is about a much smaller government. In fact, just about the smallest government there is. It is the government of a small boarding school on the remote coast of Norway called Red Cross Nordic. This is a non-profit school, part of a big network of international schools called the United World College, with the noble mission of training tomorrow's leaders. Now, this school, Red Cross Nordic, is currently engulfed in a management crisis. This could be the most serious crisis the school has faced in its 20-year history. It's something that's going to force the school to take action. And if the school doesn't take action, then things are going to get really bad. The trouble is, I'm having trouble convincing anyone associated with this school that there is, in fact, a crisis. So that's why I need to make this video. I need to describe what the crisis is, what its roots are, why it's coming to a head right now, and why it needs to be resolved before even worse things happen. And you can look up that video. That video may be linked up here or it may be linked down there. But I want to create a firewall between these two videos because neither of these things are something that the school really wants on their resume, but especially the second incident. So I will let this video, the separate video, tell the story of this incident. So what I can tell you is that the deputy rector, who was my persecutor during my incident, my attempt to visit the campus, did something stupid in the woods just off of campus. I wouldn't call it malicious or having bad intent because he always has good intent. It just exhibited a lack of adult judgment. Now, this was in response to students exhibiting a lack of adult judgment. But they're teenagers and you expect it of them. You don't expect lack of judgment from the staff. So this incident involving the deputy rector is a crime. It's the sort of thing that gets people arrested. It's the sort of thing that gets people fired. And it appears that neither of those things have happened. And it appears, to my best information, that the deputy rector is still the deputy rector. He's still the sheriff in town, in spite of multiple incidents of poor judgment. So you have to wonder, what is going on in this organization? This is a school, an institution that is supposed to be training tomorrow's leaders. It is supposed to be instilling in them certain values of intellectual and emotional discipline, of having principles and obeying those principles, and having leadership, whatever leadership is, being able to make your own judgments about things and to lead others in those judgments, to convince others of your position. And these people who are in the charge of the school don't have any of those skills. So you have people, you're trying to teach people leadership when there's no leadership. The school has no leadership. There's no one in charge. The rector is nothing more than the figurehead that leads the front of the ship. The ship is actually steering itself. Now, supposedly there's this board of directors that appoints the rector, that is the rector's boss, and the board of directors, if it's like other board of directors, they're citizens, they're ordinary citizens who meet a few times a year and basically approve everything that's put in front of them. So they're not going to provide any leadership. So where does the leadership come from? If an employee is in a position that he doesn't belong in,
not for any fault of his own, but just for lack of skills, who's ever going to remove him? He's just going to stay there forever, which is part of the reason I just won't let this thing go. I mean, I have to be the sheriff in town because the real sheriff is incompetent and he's causing a lot of damage. He has to be damaging a lot of students. And how he's damaging them is that there's no sense of justice. That if you're accused of something, you're guilty. You have no opportunity to defend yourself. And there's no sense of fairness in the rules. And when the citizens sense that their legal system has no fairness, well, they're going to break the law with impunity. And my issue now is, does this transfer to other UWC schools? Is this a systemic problem with other UWC schools? Or is this limited just a problem here at Red Cross Nordic? So that will lead me eventually into Chapter 3, where I start to expand my investigation into the other UWC schools. But first I want to just hit a few philosophical topics. If I take my hand, because I'm a human, and try to penetrate the force field, you see I can't do it. One common feature of all of these schools is their geographic isolation. A few schools are urban, like Hong Kong, but more of them fit the Norwegian model, where the school is 3 hours from the nearest city. You're essentially taking 200 students and you're putting them on an island, and you're controlling everything that comes and goes from that island. You've cut them off from the outside world. You're telling them they're part of something big. What does that sound like? Well, it could be called a school, or it could be called a cult, where you're cutting people off from the outside world and you're feeding them what you want them to know. I said that some aggrieved parties have contacted me, aggrieved alumni have contacted me, and some of them are bringing this up, are calling their school a cult. For example, one anonymous correspondent is sending me the definitions, the official definitions of what a cult is, and pointing out how the UWC is fulfilling all of those definitions. I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying that this is something that's going to dog the UWC as long as it exists. This question is this a school or a cult? And because these campuses are so isolated, so cut off from the outside world, you really have to work to make sure you're not a cult. And every school almost needs an anti-cult officer whose job is to bring influences of the outside world into the school. And there has to be a deliberate attempt to do that, because the world won't fly to the remote coast of Norway unless you encourage it to do that. And what my experience is they're not encouraging anyone to do that, because at no time in the 4 months of my experience did anyone welcome me. Was there any sense that I would be welcomed to campus for what I had to offer? The best they could muster is that I would be tolerated on campus. And the only reason I would be tolerated is because a student wanted me to speak. Now, evidently, they're giving a talk at the beginning of the semester, at the beginning of the school year, and the talk is saying, we want you to be part of your own education. We encourage your ideas of things to bring to the school to broaden everybody's knowledge. And evidently, that's just propaganda. Has no basis in fact. And my student sponsor, the guy who presented my proposal, he believed the propaganda, and I believed the propaganda. What he actually received, however, is abuse for the crime of bringing this dangerous person to campus or trying to, he was punished. He was first ignored, and then he was blamed, and then he was humiliated. He was forced to defend me against vague sexual charges that he couldn't talk to me about. And this caused him enormous stress. I mean, he held up, he's a brave man, and he held up as best he could, but ultimately he just couldn't take it. When they put him in the position of, it's us versus them, well, he unfriended me just like everyone else. But what is the message that is saying to students? It's saying, we don't really want your ideas. If you bring new ideas to campus, you will be punished. Because what the school really wants is it wants 100% control of everything that comes onto campus. And by default, the campus gatekeeper is the deputy director, this sheriff, because he's going to determine whether or not someone is a threat. And if he's uncomfortable about anything, if any one student is uncomfortable, then he becomes uncomfortable, and he puts any outside influence through the ringer in the name of protecting these students. So from his standpoint, he's just trying to protect the campus. From another standpoint, he's exerting censorship control over the information that comes to this campus. Now, to be fair, this year, the campus did something remarkable. They hosted a TED conference. And TED is where, this internationally recognized speakers program. So not only did they just bring one speaker to campus, they brought a whole bunch of speakers to campus for a weekend. And if I had known about this in advance, I would have gone. I would have shown up, because this is one opportunity to visit this closed campus. They turn off the electrogravitic dome for this one weekend, and I could have just strolled right into campus. But unfortunately, I didn't have enough time, didn't know about it until it was almost happening, so I wasn't able to do that. But you see that there's a free speech issue here, that to counteract this cult accusation, you've got to really work hard in bringing diversity to the campus. Not just a diversity of students, you've got that, but a diversity of ideas. And just bringing TED to campus does not give you diversity. Because what TED consists of is credentialed experts in their field talking about things that everyone agrees are important on a worldwide scale. So if I have a PhD and I want to come and talk about global warming, I would be welcome to this campus. And if I were an elder statesman with a Nobel Prize, like Nelson Mandela, I would be welcome to this campus. But what if I were the younger Nelson Mandela, the one who had not yet won the Nobel Prize, who was actually doing the thing that he won the Nobel Prize for, which is agitating for human rights? Do you think he would be invited to campus? Because after all, his presence would make a lot of people uncomfortable. And we have learned from my case that just one student being uncomfortable is sufficient to cancel a lecture. So what that means is that only certain sterilized topics can be brought to campus. Only certain credentialed people can be brought to campus. PhDs, credentialed diplomats, scientists can be brought to campus because they're safe and their message is known. Who can't be brought to campus is any kind of maverick, any kind of person who actually does things in the world. In my case, I laid this right in front of them. I laid this, I'm famous for a certain field that's got a lot of TV coverage, if nothing else. So you would think that, and I'm offering to come for free, So you think that the anti-cult officer would be open to this, would be excited about this. Oh yes, we'd like you to come, and we'll give you a place to spend the night. But there is no anti-cult officer. It's just a cult. And it's all, who comes to campus is all determined by the deputy rector, and what in his very limited, very tiny little worldview, he'll determine whether someone is appropriate, and if they're outside of his worldview, they're not going to come. Now, my second philosophical issue concerns sexual harassment. Clearly that was implied in the deputy rector's first email to me. And at the time I had no idea who it was. I later learned who it was. And our social media interactions were the most benign you can imagine. Social media sounds big. It was just on Facebook, 100% on Facebook, and 100% a discussion of college choices. And this is one of the students I met in Copenhagen. I have no memory of her in Copenhagen, but I met her in Copenhagen. If we exchanged even two words, I don't remember them. But we're friended on Facebook. I see on my news feed that that she's just been accepted to a college in America, and I write back. I write her a private message that says, "Oh, you've been accepted to College X. I'm going by there in 2 days." And we had this little discussion, and she asked me to stop on the campus and take some pictures for her. If you look at the correspondence, it's her initiative that I take pictures for her. And I was happy to do it. This to me is an intellectual challenge. I saw that these kids have a problem. They have this generous endowment which pays for their college education after they leave RCN. If they get into Harvard, this endowment will make sure that they can pay for Harvard. And a surprisingly large number of them go to American colleges. And very few of them have the opportunity to visit these colleges before they accept. So you're committing, as this student said herself in our exchange, it's a big choice, 4 years of my life. And I was trying to help. And this help somehow got transformed into something evil, something bad. And I don't know what happened in her mind that she would want to go talk to the rector about it. But these are teenagers, and they don't think straight. That's the nature of being a teenager, is you don't think straight. And maybe she really was uncomfortable. Maybe she saw more in our interaction than I saw in it. And I think that's okay. What has gone wrong here is the massive mishandling of this by the administrators. Now, there is a policy in the student handbook. You can find out that the school has a policy on sexual harassment, a policy on harassment in general, and that policy is, it's bad, don't do it. But they don't offer the slightest guidance as to what is harassment. The handbook says that there's a well-defined procedure for handling harassment cases. And I sure would like to see that well-defined procedure. It must be in writing somewhere. I'd like to see it. Because I don't think there is one. I don't think they have a well-defined procedure for this. I think they're just making it up as they go along. And what makes me think that is this student went directly to the headmaster. So it says right there in the email, this student spoke to the rector. Now, would you think that's part of a well-defined procedure for these things? Wouldn't you think that that a complaint like this should start at the bottom? I mean, this woman lives in a dorm, and the dorm has a house mentor who's supposed to be there to resolve interpersonal issues. So Why didn't the student go to that mentor, go to her counselor about this? Then the counselor, who's trained in these things, can evaluate this person, evaluate this complaint, evaluate this person, the student herself, and this counselor will know the student herself, and the counselor should bounce it up the chain of command. And if it's a really serious threat, then the headmaster can be involved. But for a student to go directly to the headmaster and the headmaster to accept her complaint, to receive her complaint, just does not seem like the proper procedure. It seems like she's skipping the chain of command for some reason. And I don't know why this is. Maybe it's because she thinks the rector, who's a really nice guy and does everything anyone wants for them, maybe she thinks that this rector is going to be more receptive to her complaint than her house counselor. I don't know. It's just strange to me that it would happen this way. Now, I'm not a member of the community. I don't have any rights whatsoever. And I'm not hurt by this. To have this kind of vague charge thrown at me, I kind of laugh it off because I have dealt with a whole lot worse in my life. And it doesn't matter to me what happens here at this school. I'm going to come out okay. But that's not necessarily true for an internal case. And basically the same people, the same procedures are going to be used for internal cases. So let's say the student went to the rector, but instead of complaining about me, this man coming from outside, she complained about a fellow student. Well, that's a good opportunity for abuse. It's a good opportunity to use the harassment procedure as a way to humiliate someone. Let's say there's a boy and a girl and they're kind of in a romantic thing, and the woman is ambivalent, and she doesn't really know what to think. She's telling him yes, but not telling him, but saying non-verbally saying something else, and she doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know how to resolve this relationship issue. Well, she can just go to the headmaster of the school, say this guy won't leave her alone, and the headmaster will send the sheriff to humiliate this guy. What you have on this campus is you've got 100 young men and 100 young women thrown together on an island, and many of whom have never lived in close proximity with the opposite sex before, and there's going to be intrigues, and there's going to be conniving, and there's going to be politics of all kinds, and there will be harassment. There's going to be real harassment. There's a real danger. But there's also going to be implications of harassment. There's also going to be attempts by some parties to use harassment as a means of harassment. If you can't decide what to do in this relationship, you just claim harassment, and the administrators will rush to your rescue and humiliate your opponent. That's what I see happening here. No evidence for it. I just have my one experience. But my one experience says there's no well-defined procedure. They have no idea what to do in these cases, and they're going to screw them up. So happens that this student was 18 years old. This student was an adult at the time we had our interaction about these college choices. You know, at what point does the administration jump in to rescue one adult from another adult? And someone has to decide that. They just can't do it by the seat of their pants. There has to be a policy. There has to be an actual policy. And just one person being uncomfortable doesn't cut it, because there's so many different ways to be uncomfortable, reasons to be uncomfortable that are entirely legitimate, And discomfort has a way of jumping from person to person to person. It's infectious. It was deeply infectious in my case. We started out with one person being uncomfortable. That's all that there was in this deputy rector's email. And it ended with all of the students unfriending me. So suddenly, from one person being uncomfortable, suddenly there's a lot of people uncomfortable. An entire campus is uncomfortable. Does that mean I harassed the entire campus? What's happening here is one person is uncomfortable. And that person talks to another person who's uncomfortable, who becomes uncomfortable. And that person, the rector, talks to the sheriff, and the sheriff becomes uncomfortable. Now you come in and there are 3 people uncomfortable because they've all talked to each other. And these people, the sheriff decides to hold an inquiry. So he starts asking around, and he starts saying, this guy who's coming in, he's making people uncomfortable. What do you think? And just by asking, just by conducting the inquiry, you're making people uncomfortable. Because they start asking, well, he's never really did anything to me, but there was some strange stuff I didn't get, So everybody's, soon the bubble, the zone of discomfort gets bigger and bigger and bigger until the entire campus is uncomfortable with my coming to campus. But I didn't do that. The most I'm going to cop to, the most I'll admit to, is that I made one student uncomfortable. It was totally unintentional, and there's nothing objectively that made me do it, but I acknowledge that I made someone uncomfortable. I'm not going to take responsibility for 200 people being uncomfortable. That is the responsibility of the rector and the deputy rector who made that happen. This is called mass hysteria, infectious mass hysteria, where one person makes another person uncomfortable, which makes more people uncomfortable. It's exactly what powered the witch trials of Salem, Mass. and Vardø, Norway. This kind of infectious discomfort. But in the modern world, we're not supposed to be looking at discomfort. We're supposed to be looking at evidence. And that's what you're supposed to be teaching these kids to respect, is evidence. And there was no evidence in my case. I have all the evidence. There was nothing there that could even be remotely construed as improper. Yet the hysteria continued, and these idiot administrators unknowingly fed the hysteria. And they are the equivalent of the judges in these witch trials, who allowed the hysteria to perpetuate until people were burned at the stake. And I'm the guy who was burned at the stake, and actually I'm doing pretty good now. I'm on a tropical island right now. For a guy who's been burned on the stake, I'm really actually pretty healthy. But I guarantee there have been other people burned at the stake at these institutions who did not have such a rosy outcome. So my video about the incident in the woods was released about a year ago, July of 2016. I received no official response, and it appears that nothing has changed apart from a bunch of committees being consulted. The same management team seems to be in place. So maybe it's time to ratchet things up a little bit. And I had an opportunity to do that at the beginning of this year. I took my first big trip to Africa. I did a 2-week driving tour in South Africa. And while planning my tour, I looked at the map and saw that Swaziland was right along my path of travel. Swaziland is a tiny little country that's mostly enclosed in South Africa, and it happens to be the home of a UWC school. It occurred to me as I'm planning my trip, hey, I could speak at that school. I could offer my services as a speaker
at that school. I could talk about Area 51. So I composed a proposal. Instead of 3 pages, I tried to make it 1 page. And I sent this proposal by email to the headmaster of the school. And I said, I'm Glenn Campbell. I'm known for Area 51. I talked about my background and the dates that I would be coming and my free offer to speak at no cost to them. And if I'd been really devious, I would have just sent the email as that without telling them about the Red Cross thing. And it would have been cool if one school had accepted me as a speaker and the other had rejected me as a speaker, because which one is right? But to be honest, to be forthright, after my email, I signed it Glenn Campbell, and I had a postscript saying, by the way, Red Cross Nordic has already rejected me as a speaker. And I gave him a little summary of the situation and a link to my website on the witch hunt in Norway. So that probably killed my chances of actually speaking at that school. And in fact, the headmaster wrote back. He actually wrote back. That's something. I mean, that would never happen at Red Cross, but he actually wrote back and said, we're unable to accommodate your request. So what have I accomplished in that? Well, I told them about the issues at their sister school. I told this headmaster about the issues at the sister school, which he may or may not have been aware of. But now I can say, because he wrote back to that email, that he is now aware of what's happening at Red Cross. So he can no longer deny his awareness of what's happening. And I think every school needs to take a stand on what's happening in Norway, because they're all part of the same brand. It's like if you buy a Coca-Cola in Nigeria, you expect it to taste like a Coca-Cola and not like crap, not like any more crap than it usually tastes like. So this brand is United World College, and if what happens at one school reflects on all the other schools, if one school has a dodgy policy on sexual harassment, does that mean the entire school system has the same dodgy policies? Does the entire school system have the same paranoid attitude toward outsiders, wanting to keep all outsiders out of their protective dome? I want the schools to take a stand on this, and my first stop is Swaziland. It's actually my second stop, because I actually visited another UWC school a year before that. This is the UWC school in St. Donets, Wales. I didn't have a chance to offer to speak because I didn't know it was there. And it was a Sunday and the office was closed, so I couldn't ask for a tour. The only thing I did is I crossed the campus. You're allowed to cross the campus to get to a church. And I did that. I saw campus. I walked around the outside of campus, but I didn't really tour the inside of campus. So Swaziland rejected me. And I wrote back and asking, well, I'm going to be in the area. Can I at least get a tour of your campus? I'd like to see it. And no response to that one. So I went to Swaziland. I arranged my own tour, which is to tour the perimeter of this facility. And already I'm beginning to think in terms of aliens. You know, if these people don't want me in, there must be something going on. By the way, the high security fence surrounding this school, multiple layers of barbed wire, what is that doing around a school? Well, that's just Africa. Because if you own property in Africa, you have to have a high security fence around it, or every nut and bolt is going to get stolen. So that was my next step. Now the Swaziland people are aware of the Red Cross thing. Maybe they have to take a stand at some point. Maybe they have to decide whether or not they're going to throw their lot in with the Red Cross people. And I'd like to see every UWC school make that decision. You have to decide who you're going to be, who you're going to support. Are you going to support your sister school, or are you going to support the truth? So I got to wrap up this video. It's gone on for too long. But before I do, I want to congratulate you, my viewer, for your fortitude, having lasted it out this long. This is 2 hours. This is the longest video I've ever made. And I could go on for 2 or 3 hours more because there's so much great material here. But I got to stop somewhere. I wish I could give you more information on the alien conspiracy. What I've proposed is a compelling theory about these underground alien bases under every one of those 17 schools. And it remains a theory until I can get into one of these facilities and investigate, because I need to find the underground entrances. I need to find the entrances between the upper base and the lower base. And until I can get into one of these facilities to investigate, it remains an open question. I can neither prove nor disprove the alien connection. But actually that doesn't interest me so much. The aliens, well, they're keeping to themselves. They're not interfering in our earthly affairs very much. They're respecting the prime directive, which is not interfering with primitive cultures like ours. Really what interests me more is earthly affairs, like, is there intelligent life at the United World Colleges? Now that's a big open question. There were very intelligent students who I met in Copenhagen, but I've seen no signs of intelligence at the upper levels of these organizations. That they may in fact be hybrids. They may in fact be automatons that are running these places, and I have no evidence otherwise. So that's the question I can pursue, and I will probably continue to pursue it after this video. I've hit 3 chapters so far, and I sense that there are more chapters in this story. It depends largely on what UWC does. In the meantime, you can look up online. There's lots of material online. I have created a new web page. I already have an existing web page called Witch Hunt in Norway, which is all about the Red Cross thing. I've created a new page above that will follow up on issues in this video. If I mentioned any email in this video, any correspondence in this video, you can find links to that actual email on this website, and any new developments will go on that website. And if I made any errors in this video, I will correct them on that website. You can also follow me on all the usual social media streams on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube, and you can email me at Gmail, and the name for all of those is baddalailama. That's like the good Dalai Lama, but bad. You know how the good Dalai Lama is giving out useless advice, like we should all love one another and live in peace, and it's totally empty and meaningless advice, whereas the bad Dalai Lama will give you the kind of advice you can actually use. On YouTube, check out my travel shows. I have full-length travel shows on northern Norway. That's well north of the facility, the Red Cross facility, above the Arctic Circle. I have a half-hour travel show on that, and a half-hour travel show on Almaty, Kazakhstan, and literally hundreds of other videos on 2 YouTube channels.
How do you suppose the world will end? Will it end in nuclear holocaust, terrorist attack, economic crash, or environmental collapse? Will the world be lost to dictatorships or oppressive regimes? Will it end in an epidemic, asteroid strike, or alien invasion? Or will it end with babies? Cute, adorable little babies. The threat they pose to civilization is not only that there are too many of them, but too few.
So let's move on. I'm on a Caribbean island and it's time for me to fly out. So we'll talk to you next time. Over and out.